Iran's supreme leader hasn't appeared in public since the first day of this war. Right now, nobody outside a small circle in Tehran seems to know exactly where he is. Some Israeli security sources say he's already fled the country. Others insist he never left Tehran at all. And while that question sits unresolved, Iran's oldest strategic partner has been doing something almost as revealing, offering Tehran far less support than expected. Even after years of Iran arming, that same partner's war machine 2 stories, both genuinely uncertain, both well-documented, and both pointing toward the same conclusion. Whatever remains of Iran's leadership is more isolated right now than it has ever been. I want to be upfront. Some of what follows is speculative, and ill flag it clearly when it is. A story about a missing leader deserves honesty about uncertainty, not false confidence in either direction. This isn't just palace intrigue. Iran's entire strategic posture for years has rested on 2 pillars: a leadership structure built around the supreme leader having final say on everything, and a partnership with Russia treated internally as an ultimate insurance policy, if the regime's survival were ever seriously threatened. If the first pillar is now a man nobody can locate, and the second is a partner offering little beyond sympathetic statements, then the foundation Tehran has been relying on may be far shakier than either side wants the world to believe. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel carried out coordinated airstrikes across Iran, killing 5 people, including Iran's supreme leader, at the time Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It was a targeted decapitation strike aimed at Iranian leadership, not just military infrastructure. Within days, an interim leadership council was formed and Iran moved through its own succession process. The assembly of experts working under wartime conditions named a successor while the country was under active attack. The choice was Mojtaba Khamenei, the late leader's own son. Think about how unusual that process was. A succession this consequential would normally involve months of internal negotiation among competing factions and senior clerics. Instead, it happened within days under bombardment with the outgoing leaders, son emerging as the pick that speed suggests. The Revolutionary Guard and the surviving clergy prioritized continuity over any deeper vetting, because a power vacuum during a war this intense would have been even more dangerous than a rushed handover. Here's the detail that makes everything since then feel stranger. According to a Persian-language interview given by Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, reported by Red State and picked up by Fox News, Araghchi said that on the morning of February 28th, he personally told President Masoud Pezeshkian that the atmosphere had turned to war. He said he then met with a senior aide to Khamenei around 9 a.m. Shortly after that meeting, Israel struck the Tehran compound where the elder Khamenei was holding a high-level meeting. Sit. With that sequence, a foreign minister warns his own president that war has arrived, meets a senior aide about an hour later, and then a strike lands on that exact compound shortly afterward. That's not the profile of a lucky hit based on general intelligence about where leadership might gather. It reads like a strike built on real-time or near real-time knowledge of a specific meeting at a specific place on a specific morning. If accurate, that raises uncomfortable questions about how compromised Iran's internal communications already were before the war's first shot was fired. And here's the part most coverage skipped over that same account may explain why Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader, has been seen or heard from publicly since day 1 of the war. If the strike hit the same compound during a high-level meeting involving senior aides, it raises real questions about who else was present that morning and what that means for the new leader's own status and whereabouts in the aftermath. Fast forward to July when the story went public. According to the Washington Times, Mojtaba Khamenei's whereabouts became a major story after the Saudi broadcaster Al-Hadath cited an anonymous Israeli security source claiming the Iranian leader had left the country. That report spread within hours, but the story splits from there. Other Israeli officials, quoted separately, said Israel actually believes Khamenei is still in Tehran. 2 different sets of sources inside the same Israeli security and political establishment, giving contradictory answers to the same question at the same moment. So, which is true? Based on the reporting itself, nobody outside a small circle actually knows. And the most interesting part of this story might not be the answer. It might be that the uncertainty itself is the point. According to that same Washington Times reporting, several analysts believe the conflicting accounts could reflect a deliberate Israeli intelligence effort designed to raise doubts about Iranian leadership and undermine Iranians' confidence in their own government. Alex Vatanka, a senior fellow and founding director of the Iran program at the Middle East Institute, was cited discussing exactly this dynamic. If true, it's an efficient strategy, You don't need to actually know where Mojtaba is. You just need enough conflicting leaks that ordinary Iranians start wondering whether their supreme leader abandoned the country mid-war. There is precedent for this kind of operation working before, which is part of why analysts take the theory seriously rather than dismissing it outright. A sustained, unresolved question tends to do more damage to a government's internal cohesion than a confirmed piece of bad news. A confirmed death or escape gives people something concrete to react to, while genuine, prolonged ambiguity erodes the basic assumption that anyone at the top actually knows what's happening, and that erosion spreads through the bureaucracy and security services as much as the public. This uncertainty sits on top of something else worth knowing. This is the first reported escape plan for Iran's top leadership. Back in January 2026, before the war began, the British newspaper, The Times, reported that the elder Khamenei had what intelligence sources called a Plan B, a documented escape route to Russia, if nationwide protests kept intensifying. That plan reportedly would have included Khamenei himself and roughly 20 close associates, plus a way to move an asset network valued per a Reuters investigation cited in the same report at around $95 billion. That's a striking figure. $95 billion in assets tied to Iran's supreme leadership, with an actual documented evacuation plan built around moving that wealth to Russia specifically. The report also cited former Israeli intelligence official Benny Sabti, who said Russia was really the only remaining option for Khamenei, given how few alternatives existed. The report drew a direct comparison to former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who fled to Moscow when his regime collapsed in 2024, and has reportedly lived in exile there since. Building a plan around moving that scale of wealth takes years. Foreign accounts, structures designed to survive scrutiny, real institutional planning. That kind of preparation only makes sense if the people at the top genuinely believed well before this war that the regime's survival wasn't guaranteed. So here's the pattern underneath both stories. An escape plan built specifically around fleeing to Russia, documented before the war even began. And then, once the war started, and the man that plan was built around had already been killed in the opening strike. His own son and successor vanished from public view with conflicting reports about whether he's even still in the country. Now, to the second half of this story, where the reporting gets more concrete. According to Wikipedia's tracked overview of Russia's involvement, cross-referenced with reporting from CNN and The Washington Post and Al Jazeera, Russia has maintained a long-standing strategic and economic partnership with Iran, including military cooperation built over years. But its actual response to this war has been defined by caution rather than direct intervention. Russia reportedly provided intelligence support to Iran, including data on American military positions, described by one analyst as enabling Iran to sustain its defenses without pulling the Kremlin into a broader confrontation. It clearly didn't want, here's the detail that earns the word betrayal in a lot of coverage. Despite publicly condemning the American and Israeli strikes, Russia never committed troops and never engaged in direct combat on Iran's behalf. It even abstained from UN Security Council Resolution 28-Mutsanin, which condemned Iranian attacks on Gulf states rather than using its veto to block it outright. That's not the behavior of a country going all-in for an ally. It's a country staying on record as sympathetic while avoiding anything that would actually cost it something. According to Iran International, This Isn't New Russia has offered what that reporting describes as limited direct assistance. Despite Tehran having supplied Moscow with large quantities of armed drones and ballistic missiles for years to support Russia's war in Ukraine, Iranian-designed drones, some produced under license, inside Russia, have been a real sustained part of Moscow's war effort. When the roles reversed, and Iran needed comparable support, what it got back was intelligence sharing and surveillance software. Sustained drone production on one side against intelligence tips and repression tools on the other is about as lopsided a comparison as this kind of alliance gets. That same reporting suggests some analysts see this as part of a broader Putin pattern, not a one-off decision about Iran, pointing to the fall of Russia's longtime Syrian ally Bashar al-Assad, the removal of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, and Russia's limited help to Iran during the earlier 2025 conflict with Israel, sometimes called the 12-Day War, as three examples of Moscow offering little real help to allies who needed it. Most, Assad, a Russian client for over a decade, with an actual Russian base in Syria, lost his government in weeks in December 2024, without serious Russian intervention. Maduro's government was removed without meaningful Russian defense either. And now Iran, arguably Russia's most militarily useful partner in recent years, given the drone and missile pipeline feeding the Ukraine war, appears to be following the same pattern. Warm words limited practical help, and a Kremlin unwilling to spend real capital defending an ally under direct attack from a superpower. So what has Russia actually provided? According to that reporting, Moscow supplied surveillance and repression technology specifically aimed at helping Iran suppress domestic unrest tools aimed inward at Iran's own population, not weapons to fight off strikes or troops to shore up collapsing air defenses, Russia's. Public statements track the same story per Wikipedia's documented timeline. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called the American and Israeli strikes reckless and warned of unprovoked aggression that risked pushing the region toward humanitarian and economic disaster, strong language. On March 6th, Vladimir Putin expressed condolences over Khamenei's death and voiced support for an immediate end to hostilities and a return to political solutions. Notice what that statement actually calls for. Not military assistance, not weapons, a ceasefire and diplomacy. That's the kind of statement any neutral country could issue, and the timing stands out too. Moscow's first substantive public reaction to the death of Iran's Supreme Leader was, in effect, a call for everyone to calm down. According to analysis from Chatham House, Russia has given Tehran no real sign it will offer meaningful support beyond rhetoric with the Kremlin's strategy calibrated to preserve its image as a counter-Western partner. While avoiding a second high-intensity conflict on top of Ukraine, Russia is managing its own image, not defending Iran. That analysis also traces this cautious language back to a note from Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov in 1944, declaring Moscow could not remain indifferent to Iran's fate. 8 decades of declared concern paired with a consistent unwillingness to put Russian resources or lives on the line. Separate analysis from Russia. Matters lays out why this restraint makes sense from Moscow's perspective, even if it looks like abandonment from Tehran's. Side, Russia has reasons to want to raise the cost of the war for Iran's adversaries and avoid a rapid Iranian collapse, since total regime failure wouldn't serve Russian interests either. But it also has real reasons for restraint, including the risk of direct confrontation with the U.S. and the wish to preserve the relationship as a long-term asset rather than burn it in one crisis. That analysis draws a sharp contrast with the expansive American backing Israel received after October 7, 2023, and the sustained Western mobilization behind Ukraine since 2022. Russia simply won't come to Iran's defense with air power troops or open confrontation with Washington. Put it together, a supreme leader whose whereabouts are genuinely disputed, even among the Israeli intelligence sources doing the leaking. A father who reportedly had a documented $95 billion escape plan to Russia, ready before the war even began, and a Russia that, when the moment arrived, offered intelligence, sharing surveillance technology, and carefully worded statements, while pointedly avoiding anything that would put Russian lives or material on the line. If you're in Tehran's inner circle, what does that tell you? That the safety net you spent years building, both the physical escape route and the broader alliance, as a hedge against exactly this kind of pressure, might be much thinner than assumed. The elder Khamenei's Plan B assumed Russia would be a genuine refuge. What's actually happened since the war started suggests Russia is willing to be a diplomatic mouthpiece and an intelligence conduit, but not much more when the stakes get this high. That gap between the assumed safety net and the real one might explain something else. A regime that genuinely believed its most powerful ally would step in decisively wouldn't have needed a $95 billion contingency plan in the first place. The existence of that escape route suggests that even before the war, people close to Khamenei already understood Russian support had real limits, and that the actual plan was personal survival dressed up as strategic alliance. I want to be careful here, because there's a real difference between what's confirmed and what's still speculation, and I don't want to blur that line the way some coverage already has. Russia's limited, cautious support throughout this war is well documented across multiple independent sources: Wikipedia's tracked timeline, CNN, The Washington Post, Al Jazeera, Iran International Chatham House, and Russia Matters. That part is about as solid as wartime reporting gets Mojtaba Khamenei's actual whereabouts. On the other hand, remain genuinely unresolved, sourced mainly to anonymous intelligence leaks that other officials in the same intelligence community are directly disputing. It's entirely possible those conflicting reports are, as analysts like Vatanka have suggested, part of a deliberate pressure campaign rather than a straightforward account of where one man actually is. It's worth sitting with how unusual that level of uncertainty is for a head of state 5 months into leading his country through an active war. His location and status is typically one of the more reliably confirmed facts intelligence agencies on every side can establish. That it isn't here that Israeli officials themselves can't agree suggests either that Iran's operational security around its own leader has become extraordinarily tight since the opening strike, or that the ambiguity is being actively cultivated by someone with an interest in keeping it that way. Neither explanation is reassuring if you're trying to assess how stable Iran's chain of command really is right now. If Iran's own supreme leader has effectively disappeared from public view since the war's opening day, and Russia, the power Tehran spent years cultivating as its ultimate safety net, has offered little beyond words and surveillance software, what does that tell you about how much control anyone in Tehran genuinely has left over how this war ends? I don't think either half of this story is finished playing out. Sourcing note details on the February 28th strike and leadership transition draw on documented reporting on the assassination of Ali Khamenei. Araghchi's account of that morning comes from a Persian language interview reported by Red State and corroborated by Fox News. The disputed whereabouts reporting on Mojtaba Khamenei comes from the Washington Times citing Al-Hadath and separate conflicting Israeli official statements. The January escape plan reporting comes from the Times, as relayed by Iran International and the Jerusalem Post. Reporting on Russia's conduct draws on Wikipedia's cross-sourced timeline. Iran International's reporting on the military support imbalance and analysis from Chatham House and Russia Matters, where sources disagree or rely on anonymous officials that's flagged rather than presented as settled fact.